Hello, today we'll be reading from Symposium by Plato. This work, like pretty much all of Plato's works, is in the form of a dialogue. In this case, it is the framing mechanism is a bunch of friends have gotten drunk at a party, and so instead of continuing their drinking escapades, they decide to debate different definitions of love, in which Socrates, Plato's teacher and also his sort of avatar, for most of his dialogues, comes out on top with the best definition of such. Today I'll be reading from the translation by Alexander Nahamas and Paul Woodruff, and I'll be reading the first part, which is the introductory dialogue, which is between the character Apollodorus and an unnamed friend. This work is based on events that probably did not actually occur, but the people involved in the discussion were in fact real Greek aristocrats and writers and thinkers of the time immediately preceding Plato's generation. So to begin, this is the introductory dialogue. Apollodorus. In fact, your question does not find me unprepared. Just the other day, as it happens, I was walking to the city from my home in Phaleron, when a man I know, who was walking his way behind me, saw me and called from a distance, "The gentleman from Phaleron," he yelled, trying to be funny. "Hey, Apollodorus, wait!" So I stopped and waited. "Apollodorus, I've been looking for you," he said. "You know, there once was a gathering at Agathon's when Socrates, Alcibiades, and their friends had dinner together. I wanted to ask about the speeches they made on love. What were they? I heard a version from a friend who had it from Phoenix, Philip's son, but it was badly garbled, and he said you were the one to ask. So please, will you tell me all about it? After all, Socrates is your friend. Who has a better right than you to report his conversation? But before you begin," he added, "tell me this. Were you there yourself?" "Your friend must have really garbled his story," I replied, "if you think this affair was so recent that I couldn't have been there." "I did think that," he said. "Glaucon, how could you? You know very well Agathon hasn't lived in Athens for many years, while it's been less than 3 that I've been Socrates' companion, made it to my job to know exactly what he says and does each day. Before that, I simply drifted aimlessly. Of course, I used to think that what I was doing was important, but in fact I was the most worthless man on earth, as bad as you are this very moment. I used to think philosophy was the last thing a man should do." "Stop joking, Apollodorus," he replied. "Just tell me when the party took place." "When we were still children, when Agathon won the prize with his first tragedy. It was the day after he and his troupe held their first victory celebration. So it really was a long time ago," he said. "And who told you about it? Was it Socrates himself?" "Oh, for God's sake, of course not," I replied. "It was the very same man who told Phoenix, a man called Aristodemus from Cydantium, a real run to a man, who always went barefoot. We went to the party because, I think, he was obsessed with Socrates, one of the worst cases at the time. Naturally, I checked part of his story with Socrates, and Socrates agreed with his account. "Please tell me then," he said. "You speak and I'll listen as we walk to the city. This is the perfect opportunity." So this is what we talked about on our way, and that's why, as I said before, I'm not unprepared. Well, if I'm to tell you about it too, I'll be glad to. After all, my greatest pleasure comes from philosophical conversation, even if I'm only a listener, whether or not I think it will be to my advantage. All other talk, especially the talk of rich businessmen like you, bores me to tears, and I'm sorry for you and your friends because you think your affairs are important when really they're totally trivial. Perhaps in your turn you think I'm a failure, and believe me, I think the way you think is true. But as for all of you, I just don't think you are failures. I know it for a fact. You'll never change, Apollodorus. Always nagging, even at yourself. I do believe you think everybody, yourself first of all, is totally worthless, except of course Socrates. I don't know exactly how you came to be called the maniac, but you certainly talk like one, always beers with everyone, including yourself, but not with Socrates. Apollodorus replies. Of course, my dear friend, it's perfectly obvious why I have these views about us all. It's simply because I'm a maniac, and I'm raving. The friend replies. It's not worth arguing about this now, Apollodorus. Please do as I asked. Tell me the speeches. Apollodorus. All right, well, the speeches went something like this, but I better tell you the whole story from the very beginning, as Aristodemus told it to me. He said then that one day he ran into Socrates, who had just bathed and put on his fancy sandals, both very unusual events. So he asked him where he was going and why he was looking so good. Socrates replied, "I'm going to Agathon's for dinner. I managed to avoid yesterday's victory party. I really don't like crowds, but I managed to be there today. So naturally I took great pains with my appearance. Going to the house of a good-looking man, I had to look my best. But let me ask you this," he added. "I know you haven't been invited to the dinner. How would you like to come anyway?" And Aristodemus answered, "I'll do whatever you say." "Come with me then," Socrates said, "and we shall prove the proverb wrong. The truth is, good men go uninvited to good men's feast. Even Homer himself, when you think about it, did not much like this proverb. He not only disregarded it, he violated it. Agamemnon, of course, is one of his great warriors, while he describes Menelaus as a limp spearman. And yet, when Agamemnon offers a sacrifice and gives a feast, Homer has the weak Menelaus arrive uninvited at his superior's table. Aristodemus replied to this, Socrates, I'm afraid Homer's description is bound to fit me better than yours. Mine is a case of an obvious inferior feeling uninvited at the table of a man of letters. I think you better figure out a good excuse for bringing me along, because, I won't admit I've come without an invitation. I'll say I'm your guest. Let's go, he said. We'll think about what to say as we proceed, the two of us along the way. With these words, they set out. But as they were walking, Socrates began to think about something, lost himself in thought, and kept lagging behind. Whenever Aristodemus stopped to wait for him, Socrates urged him to go on ahead. When he arrived at Agathon's, he found the gate wide open, and that Aristodemus said caused him to force himself in a very embarrassing situation. A household slave saw him the moment he arrived and took him immediately to the dining room, where the guests were already lying down on their couches, and dinner was about to be served. As soon as Agathon saw him, he called, Welcome, Aristodemus. What perfect timing. You're just in time for dinner. I hope you're not here for any other reason. If you are, forget it. I looked all over for you yesterday, so I could invite you, but I couldn't find you anywhere. But where is Socrates? How come you didn't bring him along? So I turned around, Aristodemus said, and Socrates was nowhere to be seen. And I said that it was actually Socrates who had brought me along as his guest. I'm delighted he did, Agathon replied. But where is he? He was directly behind me, but I have no idea where he is now. Go look for Socrates, Agathon ordered a slave. Bring him in. Aristodemus, he added, you can share Aristomacha's couch. A slave brought water, and Aristodemus washed himself before he lay down. Then another slave entered and said, Socrates is here, but he has gone off to the neighbor's porch. He's standing there and won't come in even though I called him several times. How strange, Agathon replied. Go back and bring him in. Don't leave him there. But Aristodemus stopped him. No, he said. Leave him alone. It's one of his habits. Every now and then he just goes off like that and stands motionless, wherever he happens to be. I'm sure he'll come in very soon, so don't disturb him. Let him be. Well, all right, if you really think so, Agathon said, and turned to the slaves. Go ahead and serve the rest of us. What you serve is completely up to you. Pretend nobody's supervising you, as if I ever did. Imagine that we are all your own guests, myself included. Gives good reason to praise your service. So they went ahead and started eating, but there was still no sign of Socrates. Agathon wanted to send for him many times, but Aristodemus wouldn't let him. And in fact, Socrates came in shortly afterward, as he always did. They were hardly halfway through their meal. Agathon, who as it happened was all alone on the farthest couch, immediately called, Socrates, come lie down next to me. Who knows, if I touch you, I may catch a bit of the wisdom that came to you under my neighbor's porch. It's clear you've seen the light. If you hadn't, you'd still be standing there. Socrates sat down next to him and said, How wonderful it would be, dear Agathon, if the foolish were filled with wisdom simply by touching the wise. If only wisdom were like water, which always flows from a full cup into an empty one when you connect them with a piece of yarn. Well, then I would consider it the greatest prize to have the chance to lie down next to you. I would soon be overflowing with your wonderful wisdom. My own wisdom is of no account, a shadow and a dream, while yours is bright and radiant and has a splendid future. Why, young as you are, you're so brilliant I could call more than 30,000 Greeks as witnesses. Now you've gone too far, Socrates, Agathon replied. Well, eat your dinner. Dionysus will soon enough be the judge of our claims to wisdom. Socrates took his seat after that and had his meal according to Aristodemus. When dinner was over, they poured a libation to the god, sang a hymn, and in short, followed the whole ritual. Then they turned their attention to drinking. At that point, Pausanias addressed the group. Well, gentlemen, how can we arrange to drink less tonight? To be honest, I still have a terrible hangover from yesterday, and I could really use a break. I dare say most of you could, too, since you were also part of the celebration. So let's not try to overdo it. Aristophanes replied, Good idea, Pausanias. We've got to make a plan for going easy on the drink tonight. I was over my head last night myself, like the others. After that, up spoke Eryximachus, son of Alcmenos. Well said, both of you. But I still have one question. How do you feel, Agathon? Are you strong enough for serious drinking? Absolutely not, replied Agathon. I've no strength left for anything. What a lucky start for us, Eryximachus said. For me, for Aristodemus, for Phaedrus, and the rest, the you large-capacity drinkers are already exhausted. Imagine how weak drinkers like ourselves feel after last night. Of course, I don't include Socrates, my claims. He can drink or not, and will be satisfied with whatever we do. But since none of us seem particularly eager to overindulge, perhaps it would not be amiss for me to provide you with some accurate information as to the nature of intoxication. If I have learned anything from medicine, it is the following point. Inebriation is harmful to everyone. Personally, therefore, I always refrain from heavy drinking, and advise others against it, especially people who are suffering the effects of a previous night's excesses. Well, Phaedrus interrupted him, I always follow your advice, especially when you speak as a doctor. In this case, if the others know what's good for them, they too will do just as you say. At this point, they all agree not to get drunk that evening. They decide to drink only as much as pleased them. It's settled then, said Eryximachus. We resolve to force no one to drink more than he wants. I would like now to make a further motion. Let's dispense with the flute girl who just made her entrance. Let her play for herself, or she prefers for the women of the house. Let's instead spend our evening in a conversation. If you are so minded, I would like to propose a subject. They all said they were quite willing, and urged him to make his proposal. So Eryximachus said, We begin by citing Euripides' Melanippe. Not mind the tale. What I am about to tell belongs to Phaedrus here, who is deeply indignant on this issue, and often complains to me about it. Eryximachus, he says, isn't it an awful thing? Our poets have composed hymns in honor of just about any god you can think of, but has a single one of them given one moment's thought of the god of love, ancient and powerful as he is? As for our fancy intellectuals, they have written volumes praising Heracles and other heroes, as did the distinguished Prodicus. Well, perhaps that's not surprising, but I've actually read a book by an accomplished author who could fit to extol the usefulness of salt. How could people pay attention to such trifles and never, not even once, write a proper hymn to love? How could anyone ignore so great a god? Now Phaedrus, in my judgment, is quite right. I would like, therefore, to take up a contribution, as it were, on his behalf and gratify his wish. Besides, I think this is a splendid time for all of us here to honor the god. If you agree, we can spend the whole evening in discussion, because I propose that each of us give as good a speech in praise of love as he is capable of giving, in proper order from left to right. And let us begin with Phaedrus, who is at the head of the table and is in addition the father of our subject. No one will vote against that, Eryximachus, said Socrates. How could I vote no, when the only thing I say I understand is the art of love? Could Agathon and Pausanias? Could Aristophanes, who thinks of nothing but Dionysus and Aphrodite? No one I can see here now could vote against your proposal. And though it's not quite fair to those of us who have to speak last, that the first speeches turn out to be good enough and to exhaust our subject, I promise we won't complain. So let Phaedrus begin with the blessing of fortune. Let's hear his praise of love. They all agree with Socrates and press Phaedrus to start. Of course, Aristodemus couldn't exactly remember everything that everyone said, and I myself don't remember everything he told me. But I'll tell you what he remembered best, and what I consider the most important points.